Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unpacking Bias at Work. This is a special podcast series brought to you by AIOU as part of our STEAM Ahead campaign. Every year, for International Women's Day, STEAM Ahead celebrates the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, at the same time highlighting some of the challenges and opportunities in these fields. Through this initiative, we aim to spark conversations about equity, innovation, and inclusion, at the same time advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals while shaping the future of work and technology. I'm your host, Sindhu. I'm an associate psychologist at AIOU. Every International Women's Day invites us to reflect on progress, not just in representation, but in rights, fairness, and opportunity. The UN theme for this year is Rights, Justice, Action for all women and girls. In 2026, these principles are increasingly being shaped by a new player, artificial intelligence, which is now starting to play a significant role in workplace decisions. We recently conducted an internal experiment with popular LLMs to see whether AI describes men and women differently when identical performance data is given to it. At first glance, the outputs did appear largely similar. However, upon closer look, certain patterns began to emerge, which raised interesting questions which sparked this series. In Unpacking Bias at Work, we speak with people who use, build, and make decisions with AI in their daily work. We explore how they understand gender bias in AI, whether it shows up in practice, and their perspective on whether AI reduces, maintains, or amplifies these biases. For our listeners, you can expect real world examples, professional insights, and thoughtful discussions on how AI intersects with workplace equity, including practical considerations, challenges, and recommendations for fairer growth. To help us unpack how these LLMs work and why bias comes up, if at all it does, I am delighted to be joined by our speaker for today, Dr. Debarati Bhaumik, lecturer and researcher at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Welcome, Debarati. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Sindhu.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. Before we dive properly into today's topic, I'll just begin with a very simple activity we do with our speakers on this
Mhm.
podcast. So I'm going to read out a very short list of words. As I do, I just like you to imagine a person, right? Do not base this on anyone you already know. Just
Mhm.
imagine a person, create a new one in your mind based on the words that I'm saying. Just go with your first instinct and assign a name to that person. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'll just start off with the list: management, leadership, deliver, effective. You can just say it out loud or type it in the chat box.
So also, uh, so just somebody who comes to my mind, or it has to be
Just create a
uh,
new person, assign a name to that person. It doesn't have to, you don't have to overthink it or just randomly assign it.
yeah, I'll say Richards.
Richard. Okay, thank you. Now we'll just do it again with the second list. Same
Mm-hmm.
set of rules. Create a new person, assign a name to it. Collaborative, communication, coordinative, tone.
Marcel, like he reminds me of one
Awesome.
of my
Okay.
bosses. Yeah.
If I can ask the Bharati, is there any reason these names came up?
No, I really associated them with people I worked with in my
Hmm.
past. It's hard
Right.
for me to. Mm.
Right. Amazing. Did you notice, any certain pattern that came across with these words, Richard and Marcel?
Mm, because I know where we are going with this podcast.
Right. It's quite on the nose. So
Already
yes.
biased, okay? Like you have to think in that way. But for me it's really my lived practice. The names just came out. People I have
Mhm.
worked with.
Right.
It is not about gender for me. It's just
Mhm.
but having said that, you can say probably I worked more with men than with women in my life
Mhm.
because I
Right.
work in STEM.
Got it.
So already male names coming up.
Mhm. In the words, in the list of words that I said, did any
Mhm.
of them feel more gendered to you? Like maybe list one or list two?
You'll be surprised. I have seen the bad sides of both genders
Mm-hmm.
in my workplace. Uh, no, I have also seen very powerful women. For example, when talking about the words management,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the words that you took place. In that sense, I am not that biased towards a certain type of gender. Maybe you
Right.
can say I worked very hard to deconstruct that
Right.
in my
Amazing.
mind.
That is just something that I feel like we're all on a journey towards. But thank you so much. You've been such a great sport. This is just something that we've been doing with our speakers, and there have been, some
Yeah.
interesting concepts, but most of them have typically based it on people that they've already worked with, right? People, yeah, personal experience.
Mhm.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will just, directly jump in. So as we were, doing this, I was just thinking
Mhm.
uh, how these names just come up to us in a very
Mhm.
short period of time. So does AI think the same way that we do, or does it work on a different pattern altogether? If I'm being more specific, I'm just talking about like stochasticity, that fancy word for randomness, and how LLMs just predict the next word. So
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Uh, the answer is no, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like, look how the LLMs are trained. They're trained on distribution of words, of the text, of the corpus.
mm-hmm,
So if a word occurs more often, the
mm-hmm.
given the context, it will try to predict the next word. With
Uh-huh.
so when you're using the word stochasticity, so there is already a distribution of words which the LLM is going to predict next, right?
Mm-hmm,
It's going to generate next. But there is also a function in the LLMs in your the experiments that you were talking about.
mm-hmm.
It's called temperature for common
Okay.
man. If
Uh-huh,
you increase the temperature, it
uh-huh.
literally means you're increasing the randomness. So let's say if a word river that
Mm-hmm,
is supposed to be predicted next with a very high probability, if you increase the temperature of your
mm-hmm,
LLM, in other,
mm-hmm,
wo- in other words, you're increasing randomness in your system,
mm-hmm.
it will shift the distribution of the next word that's being predicted. If river had, let's say, 90% of probability of being coming next,
Mm-hmm.
it will shift that reduce that probability and give it to some other words in the
Okay.
distribution.
That is quite interesting. Is there an opportunity for us to do that with like the
Yes.
typical?
Yeah, with the
Yes.
typical
Okay.
ones, you can set the temperature and then try to see how what output comes, how
Okay.
sensitive
Okay.
output will be.
Interesting. Interesting. Right. So the randomness that LLMs typically work with, you're saying certain factors like temperature also affects it,
Yeah,
right?
but it's you can set it as a user,
Mm-hmm.
right? No, all these models are statistical in nature, right? There is an inherent randomness that is
Right.
there,
Right.
and
Okay.
you can play with that randomness.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
how how jaggedy you want your output to be, how
Right.
inconsistent you want your output to be.
Got it. Right. So keeping this, randomness that we're talking about. So
Mhm.
while we did our experiment, we ran it across 36, 18 trials for each phase. So
Mhm.
within that randomness, there were still patterns emerging, right? So I'm just curious, how does within that randomness these certain patterns emerge, which might favor one gender or which uh, sort of that
So,
discrimination bias exists?
so this is the experiment where you gave the name, right, of the employee.
Yes.
The gender pronouns or the attributes were there.
Right.
Yeah, like look, these LLMs are trained on whatever there is on the internet, and then the internet is a very sexist place to be, right?
Mhm.
Like just open Reddit, for example.
Mhm.
So that LLM is like a child. It has learned in a very layman terms. Let me break it down.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
like a child's
Absolutely.
learning, right? Like it sees something and it has learned what it has seen.
Mhm. Mhm.
And of course, you can course correct it. There is
Mhm.
something called reinforcement learning that goes on later
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
You can course correct these biases that exist, but these biases will always be there. You cannot
Right.
like you cannot put the agency on the model.
Mhm.
Agency is
Mhm.
on us who are using it. How we
Right.
are going to use it. Now, this
Right.
reminds me of At some point, like people were using grok, for example, right? Like there's the whole case of undressing women. So
Right,
we
right.
cannot blame grok for undressing women. It was us
Mm-hmm.
who was prompting that LLM, that
Mm-hmm.
image
Mm-hmm.
generator to do this.
Right.
So we can safely say that these LLMs will have biases. It's there. The question
Mm-hmm.
is, we know about them,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we correct ourselves there?
Right. I really like the example of you using AI as a child. It's just stumbling upon that well marked path,
Hmm.
that is the path of our internet, if you in
Yeah.
your words. And I also like the fact that you touched upon human agency as something that is of utmost importance when we're using it.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, AI or LLMs, they are mainly tools for us, and we are the ones sort of, telling it what to do and uh,
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So from our conversation so far, if AI is sort of following our lead and it's
Mhm.
trained based on the data that is already available, is
Yeah.
there a way for us to break this cycle as we continue integrating this into our workplace decisions?
So there are two things, right? Like, question is, what kind of organizations are using these AI systems, right? If it's a small
Mhm,
SME,
mhm,
they will not have the resources to retrain this model, right? You can definitely retrain this model on more neutral data, more
mhm,
fully distributed data.
mhm,
I will not expect a company whose revenue is 1 crore to spend 50,000 on
mhm.
retraining your AI models for doing for simplifying your work life, right?
Right.
So in that case, I think the more cheaper or a long term solution would be to train the employees and to
Mhm,
see to humans, people who are
mhm.
using it. And
Right.
then for the first to show, most of the times people are unaware of these biases,
Mhm.
right? I don't know when you did your experiment for the organization, were they aware of these biases that they
So
exist?
this was a hypothetical experiment.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but I do have to tell you, like as a researcher, before I went in to the experiment,
Mhm.
my view of AI was slightly different. I did not expect, bias to be this outright because, like, when you're using it as a regular AI, I mean,
Mhm.
regular user, you
Mhm.
just give
Mhm.
it gives you what you want. It seems very straightforward and normal, right? You do not have the chance to sort of compare between two outputs and see.
Yeah,
So yes, I totally agree with you that people may not really be aware of how certain biases may creep in.
yeah.
Yes.
I think for me, given I'm in the field, I'm like, yes, these biases are obvious. They exist.
Mhm,
They're supposed to exist because of the nature of the training, nature of data that they were trained on. So the first will be awareness. And we also know that we humans are more forgiving towards machine than to other humans.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Right. Mhm,
you probably know this as psychologists. Like we
mhm,
trust machines more than, like, or no, we don't trust machines more than humans, but we are more forgiving to a judgment that comes out of a machine compared to
right.
a judgment coming out of a human.
Mhm,
Uh, right. So I think so. People are also more forgiving if that bias exists. So
mhm,
the first step will be then awareness for me. So as soon as employees know
mhm.
that these biases exist, then the second step comes, how do we train them to use
Right. So AI literacy would be
AI
the most
literacy?
best.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
that's step
Uh,
one.
right. For example, if a huge organization is trying to actively introduce AI into one of their processes,
Mhm.
uh, how would you sort of recommend or uh, what are some levels at which the organization can maybe sort of have guardrails set up or something of that sort?
So first of all, it depends on the use case,
Hmm.
right? Like the two things. First, what industry is it? Is it a highly regulated industry or not?
Okay.
Second, second will be what is the use case?
Hmm.
Because look, if there are no laws, if there are no governance, nobody cares, right? And especially
Hmm.
uh, if there are no laws, there's nothing about flouting a law. I will do anything that I want to do to make my life easier.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there should be some internal guidelines within the organization, like a code of conduct,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we can create an AI code of conduct, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How should within a big organization for a use case, how should AI be used? And after this code of conduct is actually created, then comes training of your employees. It's a long
Mm-hmm.
process. If a big organization has such means or
Right.
uh, right to invest. Then the
Mm-hmm.
second will, how do you train your employees? And the
Mm-hmm.
third comes your internal audit,
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
how like I think audit is the one of the ways out to protect as an also organization to protect yourself from some doing misusing AI. Just imagine you you have misused AI unknowingly, some
Mm-hmm.
employee, and then there is a
Mm-hmm.
complaint out in the market, like your corporate reputation is gone.
Right.
More,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
At least it affects your shareholder value, for
Mm-hmm.
example. So there is internal audit, and the fourth step is it actually comes from banking. Is the first line of defense is the external audit. But for
Mm-hmm.
external audit to happen, you need regulations in place.
Right.
So in context of India,
Mm-hmm.
yet don't know what kind of AI regulations are there in place. Like in the European Union, we have the EU AI Act that is work in force 2025, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not it has been implemented already, and then all in upcoming years, all companies using AI will be audited. If not
Okay.
audited, are legally obliged to
Mm-hmm.
to safeguard these regulations, right? To fall under these regulations. So something that is needed in
Mm-hmm.
India, given how rampantly we are using it.
Right.
I do know at least in there is ASEAN in Southeast Asia. There is this whole
Mm-hmm.
regulation or at least a framework around uh, use of AI and
Okay.
responsible use of AI. But I'm yet
Mm-hmm.
not aware how much it has been implemented as a legislation.
Right. Right. Even in our last conversation, you just mentioned the European Union's Act, right, around AI.
Yes.
Can you just give us like a brief idea of how it works there?
So the EU AI Act, what it has done is it has categorized AI systems into low risk, medium risk, high risk, unacceptable risk,
Okay.
right? So,
Uh-huh.
for example, social scoring, mass
Mm-hmm.
surveillance, these are unacceptable
Mm-hmm.
risks. You cannot use
Okay.
them.
Okay.
You cannot do any biometric identification
Mm-hmm.
of a human being using
Mm-hmm.
AI. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Uh, So I think something similar can be useful. A high risk system can be a system that may infringe the fundamental rights
Mm-hmm.
of of
Mm-hmm.
of European Union citizen.
Right.
So
Got it. So
then
it's a. Mhm.
it's a tiered, it's a traffic light
Right.
uh,
Right.
risk assessment, and then for every model or every use case that falling under different risks, they are
Mm-hmm.
they have to follow different laws, regulations. Not different regulations, but different methods of how they can be implemented, how they need to be checked, uh,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of data they can use, what can be the use of those
Mm-hmm.
systems, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes sense as well, right? Like it's a risk-based, uh,
Yes.
act for
Yeah,
based on the use case and the amount of risk, like you mentioned, surveillance, social monitoring, etc.
yeah,
I totally get how misusing AI in those scenarios could lead to like mass impact on people.
exactly. So I think for Indian context, we can first look into what are the fundamental rights of Indian citizen, and
Mm-hmm.
if using an AI system is affecting that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe the experiment that you did might not fall under it, but who
Mm-hmm.
knows to what extent? Like if you're systematically discriminating one gender than another in their performance review,
Mm-hmm.
it might
Right.
lead to a trickle down effect. But again, it does not. Well, I am not a lawyer. I'm neither.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it's very hard for me to make. I don't want to make any. big
Mhm.
statements here, but then that is step one probably. Is the AI
Mhm.
system infringing with my fundamental rights or not?
Right. Right. And as AI is sort of increasingly being integrated into organizations, there was recently a research that said that almost 32% of organizations in India are, taking their AI use beyond pilot, and around
Mhm.
50% are planning to increase their investment into AI into their workforce in the next 12 months or so. So I agree with you that India, if it has something that goes beyond frameworks into something that organizations can follow or adapt
Yeah,
it based on the use case, that would
I
be.
yeah, I think we can. I think the EU AI Act and the ASEAN guidelines. Also, UK has got
Mhm.
guidelines to use AI. I think we can follow them and then translate it into Indian context,
Right.
because India
I-
is special, right? Like we have to,
Mhm. Mhm.
our rights and
Mhm.
fundamental rights are different compared to other
Absolutely.
countries.
Right. Amazing. Thank you so much. You've spoken on many levels. I feel like on the data training level, on the AI literacy level, a little bit on the governance level as well, which sort of brings me to my last question, right? So, how does responsible AI look like in our daily life from a technical standpoint, maybe? Not from a user side, but more of a
Mhm.
technical perspective.
So, because AI is a very big term, right? Like, nowadays people think LLMs are the only AI that's
Mm-hmm.
there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are predictive modeling. There are models, for example, when you're ordering Uber,
Mm-hmm.
it's not an LLM. It's a different kind of predictive modeling that's going on. Or as I used to, like, an example I gave you, whether you should get a loan or not.
Mm-hmm.
Those are different machine learning statistical models uh, that banks use, for example. So there is a life cycle. There's something called a machine learning life cycle where you first you build the model, you deploy the model, you monitor the model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
and this cycle goes on. The monitoring and then audit of the model happens, and then
Mm-hmm.
the cycle goes on. So I think for responsible AI in daily deployment,
Mm-hmm.
this monitoring part is very important.
Right.
So 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 how is your model making predictions over time?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at time t0, when your model went into deployment, you tested, hey, I'm not discriminating against men and women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over time, let's say, like, let's just take this example of, let's do CV screening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah,
Right.
you should get a job. So when you created the model, it was perfectly fine. It's not discriminating against men and women. The cycle goes on for 6 months. It's all good. The chances of men and women who gets a job, is the probability is pretty much same based on their qualification. But over
Mm-hmm.
time, when these models are ingesting data every day, depending on
Mm-hmm.
how the load is. Over time, your data might drift. All of a sudden, it can have, you have a lot of men, a lot of male who are only applying for jobs. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you retrain the model, this algorithm will learn to give job to a man, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
And if you don't monitor it, then your data
Mm-hmm.
has drifted. Data has, the distribution of your data has moved, and your model is learning something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you
Yeah.
don't keep monitoring them,
Mm-hmm.
every it depends on the industry how you're legally obliged to do. But if you have no regulations around, you should be
Mm-hmm.
monitoring them every month at least.
Every month. Okay. Right.
But there are these metrics. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like measuring somebody's blood pressure every month. It's not that hard. These systems are,
Mm-hmm.
um, of course, you have to implement them. There is a whole stack. You have to write the whole code base.
Mm-hmm.
But there is enough literature. There is enough metrics that you can implement to monitor these systems, and then you keep checking
Mm-hmm.
the health of my model, basically. If I put it
Right.
in that.
Right. Right. Uh-huh.
So that is, in one sense, is I personally think is responsible AI in practice, to keep on monitoring and then
Mm-hmm.
it keep on. So taking an example again from banking, it happens. My background, comes
Mm-hmm.
from there. You also separate the teams: people who build the models, people who monitor the models, people who audit the models. They are separate teams. They don't, so
Mm-hmm.
that they don't collude with each other.
Right, right.
Um,
Makes sense.
so these are, I mean, it can be a one-person team, it doesn't matter, but you should make sure that at least there is some independence who are checking
Mhm.
each other's work.
Right.
And this is pretty easily possible, I think, in big, even medium size, or if not medium, big organizations.
Mhm, mhm.
And then
Right.
comes AI literacy, then comes uh, awareness, etc.
Mhm. Right.
But
Right. Thank you so much, Debarati, for sharing that. The main takeaways for me has been like the importance of monitoring on a regular basis based on the risk, use case, and to
yes,
keep the teams separate so there is no sort of cross contamination between them.
yeah.
One last point that I would just like to touch upon. This is something that came up in our last conversation as well. We've
Mhm.
so far been looking at just one attribute, that is gender. How
Mhm.
does intersectionality play into this?
Very much. You will be surprised how worse the results will get. There's a piece of research I want to do. I
Uh-huh.
am not finding time or students right now yet to do
Right.
it with them. But that is something, if you're interested in, like in your work,
Mhm.
you would see the results are will get worse. That's for sure. It will get worse. The
Right.
more sections you will, the more cross sections you will have, the
Uh-huh.
more discriminatory you will see your models will
Right.
become.
Right.
But
On
I
this,
yet don't have the experiments done, right? Like, but
uh-huh, uh-huh.
it's my hunch
Right.
that.
I hope, that you do get to do, and there is a lot more research on, these intersections and AI and how bias and discrimination work here. On this optimistic note, thank you so much, Debarati, for joining us today.
Thank you for
Some
having
of the
me.
main takeaways that I took from this is the importance of human agency, the
Mhm.
importance of monitoring, auditing, uh, sort of like having a risk-based format, customizing it to your use case, and ensuring that the team that builds, develops, and audits them are kept separate. Is there any other point that you'd like to add before we close the call?
I am a very big follow like proponent of governance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the
Right.
governance, it is a top-down approach, governance
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the organization. So I think if you want to start having to use responsibly use AI,
Mm-hmm.
uh, bottoms up can be there, but I think it has to be a top-down. If it And especially in India, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know there are different kind of cultures, right, in the world, like
Mm-hmm.
Hofstede's culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So India
Right.
comes under this very hierarchical system,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? In India, I think we need a top-down approach. So
Amazing.
to start with, if we can kind of somehow enforce
Mm-hmm.
some kind of works from the above to go down,
Mm-hmm.
probably that will be the fastest way in India to implement responsible AI.
Right. Thank you so much. That was brilliantly put. Right, we've reached the end of our call. Thank you so much, Debarati, for the insightful conversation we've had so far, uh, and for helping us see sort of these patterns more clearly. So this has been great. This has been Unpacking Bias at Work. I'm Sindhu, and until next time, stay curious, stay observant, and keep pushing for a more equitable future. Thank you so much.